أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون، الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى، والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. واللعنة دائمة الباقي لأعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم وغاصب حقوقهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: ثم أورثنا الكتاب الذين اصطفينا من عبادنا. صلوات عليك ورحمة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you for your villa of Ahlul Bayt in showing this support for the Ahlul Bayt by organizing events which is associated to the history of the Ahlul Bayt. We've gathered tonight to commemorate the wafat of our 11th Imam, Imam Hasan Al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam. Part of the expression of loyalty to the Ahlul Bayt is that we also link our own personal losses and tragedies with the events of the sadness of Ahlul Bayt. And that's where you see the Jahlum Majalis for the Mu'mineen also. This is a way of trying to link our sorrow and grief with that of the Ahlul Bayt. Because ultimately, if you look at the level of suffering of Ahlul Bayt, as our 6th Imam said, that there is no greater tragedy than the tragedy of Ashura. Even when we look at the latest incident in Kuwait, as I had mentioned even on Thursday night Majlis, that at least the Muslims in Pakistan and even the government of Pakistan, even though coming 14 centuries after Rasulullah, they were forced to pay attention to this issue of the bodies being there, not buried. You know, they had to think about it, they had to do something in order to facilitate that process. But just 50 years after the wafat of Rasulullah in Karbala, there were about 25 to 30,000 people who used to recite the kalima of Rasulullah, but that didn't even have a little bit of sense of respecting the body of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam. And that's where we have to basically look at our own personal losses and tragedies and link that with the supreme tragedy of Ashura. Salawat alayhi. Keeping the occasion in mind, I would like to talk about the role of the Imam in preserving and defending the teachings of the Quran. As a Shia community, we know that the concept of Imamat is very pivotal to our madhab and our deen. When we look at the two sources of guidance that the Prophet left for us, he mentioned Kitabullah wa itrati Ahlul Bayti. The Quran on one hand and my family on the other hand. Quran is the constitution for us. It is the book of guidance. It is the source of guidance. And the Ahlul Bayt are the authorized teacher of the Quran. They are the one who can give us the true interpretation of the Quran, and they are the true embodiment of the values of the Holy Quran. This is also mentioned in Surah Fatir, which is Surah number 35, Ayat 32, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this concept of virasat of the Quran. Where earlier in the ayat before it, he says, وَالَّذِي أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ هُوَ الْحَقِّ. That, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the book that we have revealed to you, هُوَ الْحَقِّ, that is the truth. مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ. And this is a book which has come to confirm the revelations which had come earlier. إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِعِبَادِهِ لَخَبِيرٌ بَصِيرٌ. Verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all aware and all seeing as far as His servants and human beings are concerned. And then in the following ayat He says, ثُمَّ أَوْرَثْنَا الْكِتَابَ الَّذَيْنَ اسْتَفَيْنَا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا. Addressing the Prophet, He says, we reveal the book to you. And this is the book of Haqq. In the next sentence He says, وَأَوْرَثْنَا الْكِتَابَ. We made this book to be inherited. الَّذِينَ اصْطَفَيْنَا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا. We made this book that it be inherited by the chosen servants of us. So Rasulullah brought the book. But there are some who are the waris of this kitab. They are the heirs of this book. And they are actually the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt. Because in the same ayat that Allah talks about the Ummah, that the followers of the Prophet will be of three kinds. فَمِنْهُمْ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ. There will be some who commit sins and they are unjust to themselves. وَمِنْهُمْ مُقْتَصِدٌ. And there are some in the Ummah who are in the middle path. Not that bad, neither perfect. وَمِنْهُمْ, but there is a group among them, سَابِقٌ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ, who actually are ahead in doing good deeds, بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, with the tawfiq and the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَضْلُ الْكَبِيرُ. That is indeed the greatest of grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you look at the conversation which was there between Abu Hashim al-Ja'fari, one day he approached our 11th Imam, Imam Hasan Al-Askari salatu wassalam, and he asked the tafsir and interpretation of this ayat from Surah Fatir. And Imam gives the interpretation. He says, الظالم لنفسه, those who are unjust to themselves, لا يقر بالإمام. Those are the Muslims who do not believe in the Imam. والمقتصد, those who are in the middle path. العارف بالإمام, they are those who know the Imam and accept the Imam. والسابق بالخيرات, and those who are ahead of others in doing good. Al-Imam, it refers to the Imam himself. And so we see in this ayat and the tafsir that we have from our 11th Imam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the Quran to the Prophet, but then He says, I'm going to make this Quran the miras, the inheritance for the Ummah, but not for everyone. Not everybody deserves to be the waris of the Quran. Those are the people who have been chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are the Itrat and Ahlul Bayt of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And one of the functions of the Imam is basically to protect the Quran, to protect the integrity of the Quran and the meaning of the Quran. And we see this in the life of our Imams from Amir al-Mu'minin all the way to the 11th Imam. And there is a very interesting event which took place in the life of the 11th Imam, which I mentioned it more than once. So I'll leave it to your memory, where there was somebody who was trying to come up with contradictions of the Quran, and how Imam took the initiative through his students to guide him to the right path and abandon his project of looking for contradictions in the Quran. We have to understand the importance of the Imam and the Quran. We have to realize that Quran cannot be a book that we can play with. Unfortunately, there is a tendency these days, and we have to, live up to that challenge, to not lose our belief, total belief in the integrity of the Quran. This is a book which has come to guide the Ummah, not only for the days of the Prophet, but for the remaining time which is there in this dunya. Although the book was revealed 1400 years ago, but it is a relevant book for us even now. There is a trend now, I'm not even talking about non-Muslims, I'm talking about Muslims, of saying that, well, we have to look at the Quran in its historical and social contexts. And some of the teachings of the Quran we will have to suspend. Because, those things were only for those days, no more relevant for our times. And one of the issues they pick is the issue of, laws about women. Especially when it comes to the issue of the wirasat, the laws of inheritance. They say the laws of inheritance in the Quran are unfair and biased against the women. And it's very common to hear from that segment of the Muslims, especially in the West, to say that, women get lesser share than men. And we have to be careful about it. We have to study the Quran. Nobody says, don't raise questions. Nobody says, don't think about these issues. But don't start with that statement that Quran is unfair to the women. Because you're already creating doubts then in the minds of the young boys and girls in the community. You're weakening that attachment that Muslims should have with the Quran. And it doesn't matter that these kinds of, talks come from academician in three-piece suit or from people who have abaqaba. It doesn't matter at all. Because we have to realize that the Quran is there. It is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is the source of our laws. It is the source of our guidance. And the Imams are the true mufassir of the Quran. And they are the embodiment of the teachings of the Quran. Salawat. Look at the issue of the inheritance of women in the light of the sayings of our 11th Imam. So I'm staying with the theme, relating it to the Hadith of the 11th Imam. This statement that women get lesser share in inheritance compared to men. First of all, this is a misleading statement. It is not accurate. Because if you look at the laws of, inheritance in the Quran and the explanation that we have in fiqh, you will see that the shares, would be seen in different levels. It is not really an issue of gender, man versus women, male against female. You can see different kinds of scenarios. For example, look at the a person dying and his only heirs are the parents. The father and the mother. Father is male, mother is female. That's the Islamic perspective, after all. Okay? And so a Muslim dies, the only warasa and only waris, inheritors that he has, are the parents, father and the mother. What is the share of the father and mother? Or, you look at the situation where they have parents and children. Let us look at the common situation now. Parents and children, leave the children aside. When it comes to the parents, the father gets 1/6 and the mother also gets 1/6. Actually, there will be a situation, in certain situations, depending on other, relatives of the deceased, the mother might get 1/3. But in the normal situation, the father and the mother get same share, 1/6, 1/6. Although the father is man and the mother is the woman. So there are situations where you will see, common situations where men and women are equal in getting their shares. Then there are situations where it's not equal. You look at the situation of children. If a deceased is leaving children, male and female, there is a difference. The son gets the double of the share of the daughter. So that will be a scenario where the daughters are getting less than the sons. So you have a situation of equal, the situation where the girls or the women get less, and then there is a situation where you will see that the female gets more than the male. A person dies and leaves the father and the daughter only. The father will get his 1/6. The rest of the estate will go to the daughter. 5 out of 6 will go to the daughter. 1 out of 6 will go to the father. So in that example, you see that the female or the woman is getting, much more than the share of the man or the male there. And so when you look at the Islamic laws, it is not across the board that women will always get less than the share of the man. There are different situations. Sometimes they are equal, sometimes they are more, sometimes they get less. Salawat pढ़ने एक बार और. One more example. Don't want to make it very complicated here. A person dies, doesn't have parents, his children are dead, but he has grandchildren. And let us just take a scenario where he has a granddaughter and a grandson. The grandson is the daughter's son of the deceased, and the granddaughter is the son's daughter. And the parents in the middle there are dead. How the division will be, distributed there? The granddaughter coming from the son will get double of the share of the grandson, because their shares will go according to their parents. And so there are all different situations in the Islamic Sharia, and this difference that you see, the variety that you see in the division between male and female, shows that the laws of inheritance in Islam is not a sexist law. It is not based on gender issues. It is not a system where male is preferred over the female. Nothing to do with that. Sometimes, people would like to become more intellectual there. They say, well, maybe what the Quran says reflected the social norm of the time when Quran was being revealed. Come on, don't try to misguide the people who don't know much about early history of Islam. Go and study the societies in Arabian Peninsula and the civilizations around Arabia during the days of the Prophet. Show me a single example, either the Arab civilization, or the Sassanid Persian civilization, or the Hindu civilization of those days, or the Eastern Roman Empire civilization, where they treated women in a better way. Islamic laws at the time of Quran does not reflect the social norm of the time. It is wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah did not look at any model or example of his own time, maybe in surrounding areas and civilizations and legal systems. No. This is wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is based on the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not the social norms of the time. If you look at the Eastern Roman Empire or even modern Europe, Till very recently in France, when a person dies, it is not only these male children, the eldest one gets everything. Others then become pensioners of the eldest one, the lucky one, because they wanted to maintain the size of the estate and not break it down into, bits and pieces for each generation. And so when you talk about you go to Tafsir al-Mizan of Allama Tabatabai, it's probably in Surah An-Nisa, where the issues of inheritance are there. Allama Tabatabai talks about all different societies which existed those days. And you will see that the Islamic and Quranic laws have nothing to do with the social norms of the time of revelation. This is the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat pranayik parar. Of course, the question why is always relevant, acceptable, there's no problem. Why? Why does a daughter get half of the share of the son? And there's nothing wrong in raising this question. But don't try to put this, scenario, social norm of those days, and therefore it's not relevant over time. No. Look at the overall Islamic teachings about it. And this is where you will see that what Islam says is that when the wealth is transferred from one generation to another, how do you distribute it to the second generation? Islam doesn't look at wealth by itself in vacuum. Islam actually looks at the wealth and then looks at the potential heirs. Even in the potential heirs, it doesn't just say, okay, let's go and do it the equal division. Islam looks at the wisdom of, tying rights with responsibilities. Duties with rights, or rights with duties. And so what Islam sees is that, okay, in an Islamic system, or what should be the system used by Muslims, when it comes to family life, it is the husband who has been given the responsibility of providing and maintaining the wife and the children. The wife has no religious obligation of providing for the husband or his needs. Even if she is wealthy, even if she is earning, there is no obligation on her to contribute to maintain the family or the needs of the husband. It's not haram, huh? I'm just saying it's not a duty. This is what Islam says. The duties of the husband. And since the scenario mostly would be, and we are talking about normal situation, where the children are already grown up and they are married. So you have a son who has a wife and children. He has this extra burden towards his family compared to his sister, who is married and now is responsibility of somebody else. She has no burden or responsibility in that way. And so that because of that difference in the burden of responsibility, when the division is done, Islam says, wherever the burden is more, put more shares over there. Salawat. It's one of the slides from the Will seminar that we had last year. And this is not an issue which is something new. No. During the time of our Imams, these questions were raised. Just two hadiths, one from Imam Raza alayhi salatu wasalam. Muhammad bin Sanan wrote a letter to the 8th Imam asking about certain issues, and one was this issue of why the women, especially the daughters, get less than that, the share of the son. And Imam responded in written form where he says, علة إعطاء النساء نصف ما يعطى الرجال من الميراث لأن المرأة إذا تزوجت أخذت والرجل يعطي فلذلك وفر على الرجال. Number one, Imam says when the marriage takes place, it is the lady who will ask for the mahr, and it is the man who has to pay. It's not the other way around. That's one reason he gives as an example of extra burden on the male compared to the female. وعلة أخرى, the second example, the reason he says في إعطاء ذكر مثل ما تعطى الأنثى لأن الأنثى في عيال الذكر إن احتاجت وعليه أن يعولها وعليه نفقتها. That the lady becomes dependent of the man, and she becomes ayal of the man. Whatever she needs, her basic needs have to be provided by the husband. It is his duty to provide for her and to maintain her. وَلَيْسَ عَلَى الْمَرْأَةِ أَن تَعُولَ الرَّجُلِ. It is not the duty of the wife to maintain the husband. وَلَا تُؤْخَذْ بِنَفَقَتِهِ إِنْ احْتَاجَ. And she doesn't have to provide anything if he is in need. If she does it, it's out of her own goodness. She can even say, consider this a loan, or write it down, I will ask it back later on. But it's not her duty to provide for the husband. فَوُفِّرَ عَلَى الرِّجَالِ لِذَلِكَ. And this is where then Imam connects it with the ayat of Quran, that men in general have been made responsible to maintain the women. Salawat. Coming to the 11th Imam, there was a person during his time by the name of Al-Fahfaki. And this is a narration and an event of the conversation witnessed by Abu Hashim al-Ja'fari. He says that this person approached the Imam and he asked, ما بال المرأة المسكينة الضعيفة تأخذ سهما واحدا ويأخذ الرجل سهمين. Put it in a very, feminist style of, talk. He says to the Imam, how come this poor, weak woman gets only one share, whereas the man gets double share? فقال أبو محمد, Imam Muhammad Hasan Al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam, he responds to that question by saying, إن المرأة ليس عليها جهاد ولا نفقة ولا عليها معقلة. Number one, there are certain duties which have been relieved as far as the woman is concerned. Even when it comes to the time of jihad, if it is the Prophet or the Imam or an Islamic government, starting a jihad campaign, if they need the finances, they cannot go to the women. They'll go to the men, because they are not obliged even to contribute to the jihad in that way, financially. وَلَا نَفَقَ. And a woman is not responsible for maintaining the family or the children. وَلَا عَلَيْهَا مَعْقُلَ. Even in Islam, sometimes there is a collective liability. We haven't studied about this more, but maybe some other time. When it comes to a collective liability on a community or a tribe, the women are exempted from that. Whatever is their possessions and their wealth, those who are, claiming whatever they are claiming, they cannot go out, towards the wealth or possessions of the women of that tribe or the community. They can only, demand that from the men. So because the women are exempted from all these financial duties and obligations, whereas men have this extra burden, إِنَّمَا ذَلِكَ عَلَى الرِّجَالِ. These are the duties of the husband, and that is why they get double of the share when the wealth is transformed from one generation to another. Salawat. Abu Hashim Ja'fari was a witness of this conversation, and now he continues his narration where he says, when I heard this response of the 11th Imam, I said to myself, this was a learned person, Abu Hashim al-Ja'fari. He says, you know, in my discussions with others, I've been told there was a person by the name of Ibn Abil Awja during the days of the 6th Imam. Now he says to himself now, where this person had asked the same question from the 6th Imam, and I'm told that the answer of the 6th Imam was exactly same the way I heard today from the 11th Imam. And he was just thinking about it. And this is where you look at this, you know, miraculous aspect and dimension of the Imam. Our 11th Imam looked towards Abu Hashim al-Ja'fari. He had not said anything. This fellow was just thinking about it in his own mind. Imam looked at him and he says, نعم هذه المسألة ابن أبي العوجاء والجواب منها واحد. Yes, what you have in your mind, that this was a question asked by Ibn Abi Awja to the 6th Imam, that you are right, and the answer there and what I gave was the same. إذا كان معنى المسألة واحدا جرى لآخرنا من جرى لأولنا. When the questions are, you know, asked from one Imam to the other, if it is the same question, the answer you will see is same, whether it is from the 6th Imam or the 11th Imam. Salawat padhna ek baar. And then he says, because their knowledge doesn't come from learning from others. They didn't go to school. In spite of all these attempts to put down their image, nobody ever has come forward in history during the days of the Imam to claim, I taught you this. No one from Ali to the 11th Imam, nor ever anyone anyone made a false claim that, oh, when you were a child, I was teaching you how to read and write. No. And this is where Imam then says, continues his conversation, he says, وأولنا وآخرنا في العلم والأمر سواء. The first of us and the last of us, when it comes to the knowledge and authority, we are equal. The knowledge that Allah has given to Ali is the knowledge that I have. وَلِرَسُولِ اللَّهِ وَعَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ فَضْلُهُمَا. Of course, Rasul and Ali, their status is by themselves. But when it comes to the knowledge that Allah has given to us, we are all on the same level. Salawat. What is important to keep in mind is that you look at the same question asked on the issue of inheritance, even from Amir al-Mu'mineen, and then the 6th Imam, and then the 11th Imam. Look at the difference in the passage of time, the difference in the social environment. There was a change there. But the laws were still same. And the rationale is applicable those days and even now. The problem is we don't live according to the Islamic ways, but that's our problem. We have to change ourselves to follow Islamic ways, not try to fit Quran and Islam according to what we want. You know, this is the whole issue. That we don't have to change the laws of Quran. We have to change our ways to live the life the way Quran wanted us to live. Salawat. In the World Seminar, I talked about this question, that yes, whenever we say the daughter gets half of the share of the son, you know, sometimes people say, okay, you gave this reasoning that the son has more of a burden financially than the daughter. But sometimes the sons are well off, they don't even need anything from their parents in inheritance, whereas the daughter and the son-in-law might be more in need. Well, Islam has a provision for that. We have this principle of 1/3. In Islamic laws of inheritance, it is very clear that when it comes to 1/3, you can write that in your will to whomever you want. It's only in 2/3 that you don't have a choice. That has to be distributed according to Islamic laws. And so you have this option, that whenever you feel that, well, you know, you would like to give more to your wife or your mother, for example, or even some other relatives who do not become your heirs. They are remote in relationship there, or they are more in need, or you have a daughter that you think she should get even more. You can always use the 1/3 option, where you can make the shares of the son and the daughter equal if you want. And so Islam has made the rules flexible to deal with these unusual situations. A person by the name of Muhammad bin Hassan al-Saffar wrote to our 11th Imam about this issue. He says, رَجُلٌ أَوْصَى بِثُلْثِ مَالِهِ فِي مَوَالِيهِ وَمَوَالِيَاتِهِ الذَّكَرُ وَالْأُنْثَى فِيهِ سَوَاءٌ أَوْ لِلذَّكَرِ مَثْلَ حَظِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ مِنَ الْوَصِيَّةِ. The question he wrote to the Imam, this person Muhammad bin Hassan al-Saffar, he says a person made a will about 1/3 of his estate for his sons and daughters, and he distributed the shares for the sons and the daughters equally. Is it okay, or should he be using the inheritance laws where the son gets double of the share of the daughter? Imam wrote to him the response, جائز للميت ما أوصى به على ما أوصى به إن شاء الله. It is absolutely right for that person to write the will the way he has written, because in 1/3 you have been given the option to write the way you want. Salawat پڑھنے ایک بار اور. اس زمانے میں بہت ہی ایک پاورفل کارڈ یوز کیا جاتا ہے مسلمانوں کے خلاف، اور وہ ویمنز رائٹس کے حوالے سے. اور افسوس کی بات یہ ہے کہ کچھ اپنے لوگ بھی اسی سرکل میں آ جاتے ہیں، اور کبھی کبھی جو ہے اسلام کے قوانین، قرآن کے قوانین کو سسپینڈ کرنا چاہتے ہیں، یہ کہہ کہ یہ اس زمانے کی باتیں ہیں، ہمارے زمانے کی نہیں ہیں. اور یہ ہے کہ اس زمانے میں عورتوں کی کوئی اہمیت نہیں تھی، ویلیو نہیں تھی، اس بنیاد پر یہ قوانین بنائے گئے ہیں. جہاں تک ہمارے دین و مذہب کا سوال ہے، ہمارا دین و مذہب جو ہے اس زمانے کے سوشل نارم کے مطابق نہیں آیا ہے، ورنہ توحید نہ ہوتی، ہمارے یہاں بت پرستی ہوتی، نبوت کا سلسلہ نہ ہوتا، جادوگر لوگ ہوتے آگے آگے. یہ پورا سسٹم ہمارے یہاں آیا ہے جو جاہلیت کے سسٹم کے بالکل برعکس تھا. قوانین بھی بالکل بدلے ہوئے ہیں، میراث کے سلسلے میں بھی، عورتوں کے احترام کے سلسلے میں. ٹھیک ہے، کچھ چیزیں ہیں جو ہمیں سوچنا چاہیے، جس طرح سے میراث کے مسائل میں بھی ائمہ نے کلیئرلی بتایا ہے کہ یہاں معاملہ جو ہے مرد عورت کا نہیں ہے، میل سپیریئرٹی کی بات نہیں ہو رہی ہے، یہاں ذمہ داری کی بات ہو رہی ہے. ذمہ داری اور برڈن آف ریسپانسبلٹی کے لحاظ سے یہاں تقسیم کی بات ہو رہی ہے. ورنہ آپ اگر دیکھیں، جہاں تک خواتین کے احترام کی بات ہے، خصوصاً شیعہ مذہب میں یہ بات نہیں ہونی چاہیے. اس لیے کہ ہمارے ہسٹری میں آپ دیکھیں جو کنٹریبیوشن ہے خواتین کا رسول کی زندگی کو، خصوصاً مکہ کے دور میں جو قربانیاں رسول نے پیش کی ہے، آپ اس کو ڈسکس نہیں کر سکتے ہیں مگر یہ کہ جناب خدیجہ کی قربانی اور کنٹریبیوشن کو بھی یاد نہ رکھیں. امیر المومنین کی زندگی میں خصوصاً ابتدائی دور جو ہے ثقیفہ کے بعد کا، جناب سیدہ کی قربانی اور جو حمایت کا پہلو ان کی طرف تھا، یہ بہت ہی اہم ہے ہمارے لیے. علی کے اس دور حیات کو آپ نہیں سمجھ سکتے ہیں جب تک جناب سیدہ کی قربانی کو نہ سمجھیں. اور اس کے علاوہ بعد میں آپ دیکھیں کربلا ہمارے لیے سب سے بڑی مثال ہے. نہ صرف کربلا، اس کے بعد بھی آپ پیسج آف ٹائم کو دیکھیں، کربلا کہاں ہے اور 11ویں امام کا دور کیا ہے. امام نے اپنے زمانے میں، بلکہ 10ویں امام نے یہ وکالت کا سسٹم جو ہے اس کو بہت ہی ڈیٹیل میں اور بہت ہی وائڈ اسپریڈ فارم میں اس کو اسٹیبلش کیا تھا، تاکہ کمیونٹی عادی ہو جائے کہ امام سے ڈائریکٹلی ملاقات نہیں ہوگی. اور یہ سلسلہ 9ویں امام سے شروع ہوا، 10ویں امام کے زمانے میں پیک پہ پہنچا ہے وکالت کا سلسلہ. لیکن آپ دیکھیں گے کہ 11ویں امام کے زمانے میں جو وکلاء کی لسٹ آتی ہے جس میں سے بہت سے لوگ کنٹینیو کیے ہیں غیبت صغریٰ میں، یہ 4 نائبین کو جو نام سنتے ہیں یہ لوگ ایٹ دی ٹاپ تھے غیبت میں. صرف یہ 4 حضرات نہیں تھے جو یکے بعد دیگرے نائب بنے، but they were the supreme deputy. ان کے انڈر بہت سے وکلاء ہوتے تھے جو مختلف شہروں میں ان کی ذمہ داریاں تھیں. لیکن 11ویں امام کے زمانے میں اور غیبت صغریٰ میں اس لسٹ میں ایک نام ملے گا آپ کو، مرد کا نام نہیں ہے، وہ جناب حکیمہ خاتون جو ہمارے 10ویں امام کی بہن ہیں، 11ویں امام کی پھوپھی ہوتی ہے، رشتے میں امام زمانہ کی وہ دادی ہوتی ہے. اور ان کو 11ویں امام نے وکیل اور نائب بنایا تھا کہ کبھی کبھی اگر قوم جو ہے امام تک نہ پہنچ سکے اور اپنے ایشوز کو جاننا ہے تو وہ جناب حکیمہ خاتون کی طرف ریفر کرتے. تو یہ نہیں ہے کہ اسلام میں اسپیشلی شیعہ مذہب میں مکتب اہل بیت میں خواتین کو وہ مرتبہ اور عزت نہیں دی گئی، ایسی بات نہیں ہے. بلکہ جناب حکیمہ خاتون کو جب 11ویں امام نے اپنے وکلاء اور نائبین میں قرار دیا ہے تو کچھ لوگوں کو تعجب بھی ہوا ہے، امام سے سوال بھی ہوا ہے 11ویں امام سے کہ آپ نے یہ از دیر اے پریزیڈنس فار دس، کس طرح سے آپ نے اپنی پھوپھی کو نائبین اور وکلاء میں سے قرار دیا ہے. اس وقت ہمارے 11ویں امام نے جواب دیا ہے اقتدیت بجد الحسین. امام حسن عسکری کہتے ہیں ہم نے جو کیا ہے کوئی نئی بات نہیں ہے. I have followed the example of Hussein, my grandfather. جس طرح سے امام حسین علیہ السلام نے جناب زینب کے ہاتھ میں ذمہ داری سونپی تھی. پورا واقعہ کربلا آپ صرف حسین پر قصہ کو ختم نہیں کر سکتے. عاشور کے دن تک حسین ہیں لیکن عاشور کے بعد زینب ہے، اسی لیے زینب کو شریکت الحسین کہا جاتا ہے. تو یہ ہماری تاریخ ہے، یہ ہماری لیگیسی ہے، اس کو سمجھنا چاہیے اور اپنے ذہن میں جو شبہات ہیں، کنفیوژن ہے، اس کو دور کریں اور اہل بیت کی سیرت کو آپ دیکھیں. آج ہم لوگ جمع ہوئے ہیں امام حسن عسکری علیہ السلام کی شہادت کے سلسلے میں، خصوصاً امام عصر کے خدمت میں پرسے کے لیے ہم لوگ جمع ہوئے ہیں کہ جہاں امام کو شہر سامرہ میں ان کی علمی اور اخلاقی برتری کی بنیاد پر جو پاپولیرٹی حاصل تھی، دشمن جو ہے حکومت کو لے لیا اس نے، ان سے دولت کو لے لیا، لیکن جو چیز یہ جس پر قبضہ نہیں کر سکے وہ علم تھا اور اخلاق، اس لیے کہ وہ حقیقت ہے جو آپ لمس نہیں کر سکتے. اور اسی 2 میدان میں دشمن ہمیشہ ہار مان جاتا تھا اور اسی لیے پھر ہمیشہ انہیں اپنے راستے سے ہٹانے کی کوشش کی گئی. کربلا کے بعد دوبارہ تلوار نہیں چلی، کربلا کے بعد زہر کا استعمال ہوتا تھا، لیکن پھر بھی ظاہری رکھ رکھاؤ ہوتا تھا. امام حسن عسکری علیہ السلام اپنے بابا کے گھر تھے، اسی گھر میں پیدا بھی ہوئے تھے، وہیں بابا کی قبر بھی تھی. اور شہر سامرہ میں جب امام کو زہر دیا گیا ہے، گھر کے اندر امام عصر آتے ہیں، نماز امام عصر نے پڑھی ہے، غسل و کفن امام نے دیا ہے، لیکن بعد میں امام حسن علیہ السلام کے جنازے کو اٹھایا گیا، شہر سامرہ کے مرکز میں لایا گیا جو مین میدان تھا. ہسٹورین بتاتے ہیں اس دن پورے شہر میں چھٹی کا دن تھا، تمام دکانیں بند کر دی گئی تھی، پورا شہر جو ہے جمع ہو جاتا ہے امام حسن علیہ السلام کے نماز جنازہ کے لیے اور جنازے کی تشریح کے لیے. خلیفہ کا بھائی آتا ہے جو پبلکلی جو نماز ہوئی اس میں نماز پڑھائی ہے اس نے، اور دوبارہ یہ جنازہ اٹھتا ہے، بڑے احترام کے ساتھ امام کے گھر لایا جاتا ہے. یہ جو روزہ دیکھتے ہیں یہ امام کی اپنی پراپرٹی تھی، یہ امام کا یہ گھر تھا جہاں امام عصر کی بھی ولادت ہوئی تھی، اور امام کو وہاں احترام کے ساتھ دفن کر دیا جاتا ہے. امام عصر کی خدمت میں ہم صرف اتنا کہیں گے اور امام کی اس پھوپھی کی خدمت میں کہ جو اس وقت موجود تھی امام حسن علیہ السلام کی اس وفات کے سلسلے میں، بس اتنا کہیں گے کہ مولا آپ اس حسن کو یاد کریں. آپ کے بابا کو بھی زہر سے شہید کیا گیا ہے، لیکن سبط اکبر حسن کو بھی زہر سے شہید کیا گیا تھا. آپ کے بابا کے جنازے کو احترام کے ساتھ اٹھایا گیا، دشمن نے اٹھایا ہے ظاہری رکھ رکھلاؤ کی بنیاد پر، اور یہ سامرہ تھا عراق میں، لیکن وہ مدینہ رسول تھا، وہ رسول کے نواسے تھے. ان کی خواہش تھی کہ ان کے جنازے کو اٹھایا جائے، ایک روایت کے مطابق جد کے پہلو میں دفن کیا جائے. لیکن ہم لوگ دیکھتے ہیں کہ امام حسن علیہ السلام کے جنازے کو جب اٹھایا گیا، آل مروان آ جاتے ہیں اور انہوں نے روکا ہے، اور کچھ روایات کے مطابق تیروں کی بارش ہوتی ہے. وہاں امام حسین علیہ السلام نے بنو ہاشم کے جوانوں کے اس غصے کو روکا ہے اور کہا ہے کہ اپنی تلوار مت نکالو، ہم بھائی کے جنازے کو اپنے جد کے قبر کی زیارت کے لیے نہیں لے جائیں گے، ہم بقیع میں جا کے دفن کریں گے، اس لیے کہ بھائی کی وصیت نے میرے ہاتھوں کو باندھ دیا ہے. عزاداران حسین امام عصر سے صرف اتنا کہیں گے کہ جا کے آپ عابد بیمار کے اس کیفیت کو سمجھنے کی کوشش کریں. یقیناً آپ امام وقت ہیں، آپ کے لیے وہ مناظر جو ہے وہ غیب نہیں ہے، بلکہ وہ شہود کی حکم رکھتے ہیں کہ جب امام کے ہاتھ بھی بندھے ہوئے تھے حسین کی طرح، لیکن حسین وہاں ان کے ہاتھ وصیت سے بندھتے، یہاں امام زین العابدین کے ہاتھ میں بھی ہتھکڑیاں تھی، اور اتنا مجبور تھے کہ بابا کے لاشے کو بے گور و کفن چھوڑ کے کربلا سے روانہ ہوئے. الا لعنۃ اللہ علی القوم الظالمین سیعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلب ینقلبون. خداوند اس قبل بات قبول فرما، ہمارے گناہوں کو بخش دے، ہمارے توفیقات میں اضافہ فرما، ایران کے ظہور میں تعجیل فرما. ربنا تقبل منا انک انت السمیع العلیم.